Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're diving into something that sounds a little dry on the surface, right? Like the Hall of Faith, expert speaker.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, it's anything but boring.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at all these figures in Hebrews 11 and trying to figure out what their faith really meant to them.
Yeah.
These are the people who built arks and left their homes and, faced down kings, all based on belief in something that they couldn't see.
Wow.
What drove them?
Right.
What can we even learn from these people, who lived thousands of years ago?
Well, and it all starts with how faith is defined.
Right
At the beginning.
Okay.
So Hebrews 11.1 describes faith as being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see.
Okay, so that might sound kind of abstract. I mean, how can you be certain of something you can't see?
Right.
That's kind of like blind faith. Right?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
Think of it less like blindly leaping into the unknown.
Okay.
And more like building a bridge based on a blueprint you trust. So you might not see the finished bridge yet.
Right.
But you're certain it will stand because the blueprint is sound.
Yeah.
Faith is kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's about having trust in something bigger than yourself.
Okay.
Whether that's a higher power or a set of principles or even just the inherent goodness of humanity.
So it's about having a strong conviction even if you don't have all the physical proof in front of you.
Exactly. And that conviction is what fueled the actions of all these figures in the Hall of Faith. So take Abel, for example.
Okay.
He's the very first one mentioned.
Yeah.
And he's praised for offering a greater sacrifice than his brother Cain. What do you think made his offering stand out?
Yeah, that's a good question. The text doesn't give us a lot of details.
Right.
But it does say that God looked favorably upon Abel's offering, but not on Cain's. I'm guessing it wasn't just about the what of the sacrifice, but the why.
You're right on the money. A lot of scholars believe Abel's offering was considered greater because it came from a place of genuine devotion. It wasn't just going through the motions.
Right.
But a true act of faith.
So, you could offer the biggest, flashiest sacrifice ever, but if your heart isn't in it,
right,
it's meaningless.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder for us today. Think about your own life, your job, your relationships, your goals. Are you just going through the motions, or are you approaching them with a genuine sense of purpose and conviction?
Okay.
That's where true fulfillment lies.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the next figure is a bit of a mystery man.
Right.
Enoch.
Yeah.
All we know is that he walked with God and then, poof, vanished from the earth.
Right.
What's the significance of that story? It's so cryptic.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a divine disappearing act.
Yeah.
But the key phrase here is that Enoch pleased God.
Okay.
So what does it actually mean to please God?
Yeah. Is it about following a strict set of rules, or is it about something deeper?
Right.
Like aligning your life with a greater purpose. I mean, think about it. If someone constantly disappoints you,
right,
you probably don't want to be around them.
Right.
But someone who strives to live in a way that aligns with your values.
Yeah.
That's someone you want to be around.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's how many scholars interpret Enoch's story. He lived in such a way that his actions were a constant reflection of his faith.
Right.
It wasn't about perfection, but about striving to live in harmony with his beliefs.
So it's less about ticking off a checklist of good deeds.
Right.
And more about living a life that reflects your deepest convictions.
You got it.
Okay.
And it's interesting to think about how that applies to our lives today. We're often bombarded with messages about what a good life looks like.
Right.
But maybe true fulfillment comes from figuring out what truly resonates with our values.
Yeah.
And striving to live in a way that reflects those values.
All right, now let's talk about the guy who took walking by faith to a whole new level. Noah. I mean, building a giant ark when there's not a cloud in the sky.
Right.
That's commitment.
I mean, imagine the societal pressure he must have faced.
Oh, yeah.
Building a giant boat in the desert. People must have thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
And think about the psychological toll it must have taken.
Oh, yeah.
Years of backbreaking labor.
Right.
Facing ridicule and doubt. All based on something he couldn't even see yet.
It makes you wonder what kind of person Noah was.
Right.
Was he just blindly obedient? Or was there some deep conviction that fueled his actions?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets at the heart of what faith is all about. Was Noah just following orders? Or did he truly believe in the message he was given? Some scholars argue that true faith requires a level of understanding and acceptance, not just blind obedience.
So even though Noah was acting on God's instructions, he still had to wrestle with his own doubts and fears and ultimately choose to trust.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a struggle that's so relatable even thousands of years later. Think about times in your own life when you've had to make a difficult decision,
Yeah.
step into the unknown, or persevere despite uncertainty. It takes a lot of courage and conviction to keep going when you can't see the end result.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were just talking about Noah and how he had to face ridicule and doubt while building that ark.
Mm.
And that kind of brings us to another big name in the Hall of Faith, right? Abraham.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving his home, everything he knew, to follow this promise of a land.
Right.
That takes guts.
Absolutely. Leaving your comfort zone is never easy.
Right.
And Abraham's story takes it to the extreme.
Right.
He leaves his family, his friends, his entire support system,
Yeah.
all based on a promise of an unknown land.
Yeah, it's like quitting your job and moving to a new country without knowing the language or the customs.
Right.
Or even having a place to live.
Exactly. It really makes you wonder what was going through his mind.
Yeah, was he excited about the adventure? Was he terrified? Probably a little both.
Most likely a mix of all those emotions.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his story so human and relatable.
Right.
We all face those moments of uncertainty when we're stepping outside our comfort zones.
Yeah.
But what sets Abraham apart is that he chose to trust in something bigger than himself.
Okay.
Something that gave him the courage to take that leap of faith.
Okay. And that trust led him to a lot of wild experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Like, think about that time he was asked to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Right.
That's got to be one of the most challenging stories in the whole Bible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a story that has sparked endless debate and interpretation.
Yeah.
Some people see it as a test of blind obedience, while others view it as a story about challenging God
Okay.
or wrestling with difficult moral dilemmas.
Yeah, it definitely pushes the boundaries of what we usually think of as faith, right?
Right.
How do you reconcile blind obedience with a loving God?
That's a question that theologians have been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
Some argue that it was never about actually sacrificing Isaac,
Okay.
but about demonstrating a willingness to surrender everything to God.
Okay.
Others suggest that it was a way for God to challenge Abraham's understanding of sacrifice
Right.
and to teach him about compassion and mercy.
So it's more about the internal struggle, the wrestling with faith,
Exactly.
than the actual physical act.
And that internal struggle is something we can all relate to,
Right.
even if the stakes aren't quite as high as they were for Abraham.
Right.
We all face those moments when our faith is tested,
Yeah.
when we have to reconcile our beliefs with difficult situations.
And sometimes those situations make us question everything we thought we knew, right?
Right.
What happens when things don't go according to plan? What about those figures in the Hall of Faith
Right.
who faced setbacks or didn't even see the fulfillment of the promises?
That's a great point, and it's something that Hebrews 11 actually addresses directly. Verse 39 tells us that these figures did not receive what was promised.
Wow.
They persevered in their faith even when they didn't see the tangible results.
So that's pretty profound.
Yeah.
It suggests that faith isn't about a guaranteed happy ending,
Right.
but about trusting in something bigger than yourself even when things get tough.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Think about Moses, for example.
Okay.
He led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt,
Yeah.
a monumental feat of leadership and faith,
Right.
but he also faced constant resistance,
Right.
doubt,
Mm-hmm.
and even rebellion from his own people.
Right. It wasn't easy.
He had moments of weakness, anger, and frustration,
Yeah.
just like any human being would.
So even though he was chosen by God for this incredible task,
Right.
it wasn't like a walk in the park.
Yeah,
He had to deal with real human struggles and emotions along the way.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his story so inspiring.
Yeah.
He wasn't a superhuman figure who effortlessly glided through challenges. He was a flawed human being who chose to rely on his faith to navigate incredibly difficult circumstances.
Right.
And that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah, it's like we often put these biblical figures on pedestals,
Right.
but they were real people who dealt with real problems just like us.
Exactly. And their struggles make their stories even more powerful.
Okay.
They show us that faith isn't about being perfect or never having doubts. It's about choosing to trust even when it's hard and using that trust to fuel your actions.
And speaking of choosing to trust despite difficult circumstances,
Yeah.
let's talk about Rahab.
Oh, yeah.
Her story is pretty remarkable because she wasn't even an Israelite,
Right.
and yet she's included in this Hall of Faith.
She was a prostitute who risked her life to shelter Israelite spies.
So why was her act of faith so significant?
Her story challenges our preconceived notions of who can be a person of faith.
Okay.
She was an outsider, someone who didn't belong to the chosen people, and yet she demonstrated incredible courage and conviction. It reminds us that faith isn't confined to a particular religion or social group.
Yeah.
It's a universal human quality
Right.
that can manifest in unexpected ways.
It's like she saw something in these Israelite spies, something worth believing in.
Right.
Even though it meant going against everything she knew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And her actions had a profound impact. Not only did she save the spies,
Right.
but she and her entire family were spared when Jericho fell. It's a powerful example of how faith can transcend boundaries
Wow.
and even have life-altering consequences.
Yeah. Her story is definitely a reminder that faith can show up in unexpected places.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the most unlikely people can demonstrate extraordinary acts of courage and belief.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about Moses, Rahab.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got to mention David.
Oh, yeah.
He's another one of those figures who faced some serious giants, both literally and figuratively.
David's story is full of dramatic twists and turns. He starts out as a shepherd.
Right.
Then he slays Goliath,
Bam.
becomes a national hero,
Yeah.
and eventually rises to become king.
Right.
But throughout his journey,
Right.
he faces betrayals,
Right.
battles, family conflicts,
Mm.
and even inner turmoil.
Mm.
His life was anything but easy.
And yet he's remembered for his unwavering faith and his close relationship with God. His songs are full of raw emotion, expressing doubt, fear, anger, but also deep trust and devotion. It's like he's not afraid to be honest with God about what he's going through.
That's what makes his story so relatable even thousands of years later.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the messiness of life
Right,
or
right, right.
pretend to have all the answers.
Right.
He struggles, he questions,
Yeah.
he doubts,
Mm.
but ultimately he chooses to rely on his faith to guide him through.
It's like he's showing us that faith isn't about being perfect or having everything figured out.
Yeah.
It's about being authentic, being vulnerable, and being willing to lean on something bigger than yourself, even when you don't understand what's happening.
Exactly. And, that's a message that's so relevant today.
Yeah.
We're often bombarded with images of perfection and success.
Mm-hmm.
But David's story reminds us that it's okay to not have it all together.
Right.
To wrestle with doubts and fears.
Yeah.
True faith isn't about denying those feelings,
Right.
but about acknowledging them
Okay.
and choosing to trust anyway.
Okay. So we've seen how these figures in the Hall of Faith faced some pretty incredible challenges. They had to make difficult decisions,
Yeah.
deal with uncertainty, and
Yeah.
persevere even when things didn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all these larger-than-life figures, from the Hall of Faith, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Rahab, David, and it's pretty clear they faced some incredible challenges.
Yeah.
But these stories are like thousands of years old.
Right.
How do they even connect to us today?
That's the $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah.
What can these ancient tales of ark building and wrestling with angels
Right.
actually teach us in the 21st century?
Right.
Well, I think the key is understanding that the core struggles these figures faced are actually timeless and universal.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's not about the specifics of building an ark, but about facing a situation where like everybody thinks you're nuts,
Right.
but you're following your conviction anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And think about Abraham leaving his home for a land he'd never seen. That resonates with anyone who's ever taken a huge leap of faith.
Right.
Starting a business, moving across the world, even just changing careers.
Mm-hmm.
It's that feeling of stepping into the unknown, trusting that you'll find your way, even if you don't have all the answers up front.
So it's like these stories become metaphors for the kinds of challenges we all face, whether we're like people of faith or not.
Right. Take Sarah having a child in her old age. That's not just a miracle story. It's about holding on to hope, even when logic says it's impossible.
Right. Whether it's overcoming a health issue, achieving a long shot goal, or just making it through a really tough time, it's that belief that things can change.
Yeah.
That something good can emerge even from the most difficult circumstances.
And remember that line in Hebrew
Yeah.
that says, these figures did not receive what was promised.
Oh, yeah.
That really stuck with me. It suggests that faith isn't about getting everything you want right away, but about something bigger and longer lasting.
Exactly. Their faith wasn't just about earthly rewards,
Right.
but about something beyond this world, what they called a heavenly homeland.
Okay.
It was about connecting to a purpose that transcends the ups and downs of everyday life.
So how do you think that idea translates today for people who might not believe in like a literal heaven?
Well, I think it speaks to that universal human longing for something bigger than ourselves. A sense of meaning and purpose
Right.
that goes beyond just accumulating wealth or achieving success.
Whether you call it a soul or a higher self or simply a deep connection to humanity and the natural world, there's this desire to be part of something greater, something that gives our lives lasting value.
So it's like these stories of faith are really about tapping into that deeper level of meaning, that sense of purpose that helps us like navigate challenges, make tough choices, and keep going even when things are tough.
Exactly. And, one of the most powerful things about the Hall of Faith is that it includes such a diverse group of people. Men, women, leaders, outcasts, those who achieved great things, those who simply lived their lives with quiet conviction. It's a reminder that faith isn't limited to a certain type of person or a specific set of beliefs.
So it's not about fitting into a mold, but about finding your own way to connect to something bigger than yourself, something that gives you strength, hope, and direction.
Absolutely. And that's why even thousands of years later,
Yeah.
these stories continue to resonate. They speak to the core of what it means to be human, to wrestle with doubt, to face challenges, to strive for something more, and to find meaning in the midst of it all.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Hall of Faith, I'd love for you all listening to reflect on what we've talked about today. Which figure's story resonated with you the most and why? What challenges are you facing in your own life that might require a leap of faith? What gives you a sense of purpose and meaning? Because ultimately, the Hall of Faith isn't just about ancient heroes. It's an invitation for each of us to step into our own journeys of courage, conviction, and hope.